Over the past couple years, if you've been following gun-related issues, Second Amendment-related issues, the new guns that are coming out, the gun bans that are happening, the ammo shortage, if you just look at all of it, it's been a wild ride and they all affect each other. Be very clear on that, especially when it comes to new gun owners, because new gun owners went out and they bought guns or a gun based on advice from people. And then when they see that gun in the media with the government threatening to take away that gun or the government threatening to ban it or make you register it, that sort of thing, they get rid of it. They just like, oh, I got to get rid of this thing. And we've talked a lot over the last couple of years about guns that people are returning. Like, what's the most returned gun right now? Because it's fascinating to see that pattern and why. And when I say return, for clarity, what I'm talking about is you bought it and you can't return a gun, so you go trade it or sell it or something like that. But generally speaking, you're returning it, you're getting rid of it. And the number one gun being returned right now has been a trend for a while, and I want to talk about why. It's been a trend, but there's a new trend that just started really in the last month. To pick up the pace on this particular gun. Because when it comes to new gun owners, most of them got advice to go out and buy a Glock. And they did. They took that advice. They went out and bought a Glock. And a lot of them at first, there was this pattern of not realizing it didn't have a manual safety, that it had that Glock safety trigger, that they just kind of like, oh, wait, I didn't know it did all this. So there was a massive return for a while between 2020 and 2022, really into 2023, just people second guessing their purchase because they don't understand guns. Now, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I'm just saying new gun owners, that's what happened. Is they went out and bought a bunch of Glocks, and then many of them returned those thinking this isn't the gun for me. And it was also the number one returned handgun for a long time because it was the number one most purchased handgun. So just numbers alone, you know, whether you had a problem with it or not, if they sell 1 million Glocks and 100,000 of the other ones, well, there's going to be more people returning the Glocks just because of the numbers alone. But it's different now. There's a new thing that has happened in the last month that is actually, because there was kind of a slowdown of Glock returns for a while, and then it picked up. And the reason it picked up is because the government has threatened parts or said they're arresting people that have certain Glock parts, like the Glock switch. Now, we saw this same thing happen with AR pistols when all of a sudden the ATF said you can't have a pistol brace on it anymore. People just got rid of the gun itself. They thought, well, no, I don't want to be in trouble, so I'm just getting rid of the gun. And the AR pistol was the number one return gun for a while there too. But it had nothing to do with the gun. It had to do with aftermarket parts. And that's really the problem with the Glock right now is people don't quite understand it. And that's kind of why I'm making this video, is kind of like making an alert. Hey, your Glock doesn't have a Glock switch in it. You got to go buy one of those and put it in. And I know this may sound stupid, but that's why people are getting rid of it, is because they think that the Glock is now a gun being threatened. Now, to some degree it is. And even recently with the ghost gun case in the Supreme Court, what we saw there was that it really had to do, if the gun can easily fit aftermarket parts, then they're responsible for changing the gun. Now, I'll give you an example of that. So I used to, when I first got out of college, I studied science. My very first job out of college was I was a scientific analyst for tobacco companies. So I know a lot about the tobacco industry for some strange reason. But that was my first job. And what I noticed was that all of the cigarette companies around the world, they rolled it in a paper that would burn quickly. And that's so you go through more cigarettes. Problem with that was when people would fall asleep with their cigarette, it'd keep burning. It would go out and they'd burn their house down, get severe medical issues, and then they'd sue them. So there was a company in France that designed what they call banded rolling paper, where as you quit smoking, it just goes out. So I believe it was Lorillard was the first to pick that up, but because it was kind of like, now the courts know you know, if that makes sense. So now that they know you know, you better roll all your cigarettes in it. So if I was, for example, a different cigarette company, and I did not do that, well, now I'm liable because I knew it might burn your house down. Hopefully that makes sense. So when you put that with the Glock, what the Supreme Court has ultimately said, not necessarily about Glock, but just about guns as a whole, was once you know that you can do this thing with it, that you're gonna have to modify it. Otherwise, you're knowingly doing this thing, and then it becomes a problem. So I think when people kind of put those two things together, they just think, oh, I gotta get rid of my Glock. You do not. You do not have to get rid of your Glock, nor did you have to get rid of your AR pistol. And I like making these videos because I just want to encourage you, stop it. Don't get rid of your Glock because of that. It's a foolish thing. Makes no sense. And I understand the logic behind it, but if you look at historical context of what's happened with gun bans, you're never going to lose your gun. You're not going to lose your gun. The only way you're going to lose it is if you get rid of it. And I just encourage you, don't get rid of your Glocks. Just because the courts are now tangling with Glock switches, the worst thing that could happen would be that new Glocks coming out would have to be modified not to take that Glock switch. And I believe Glock is going to be faced with that decision. Well, I think they're faced with it right now, actually, is actually modifying their Glocks. So they can't take the switch anymore. You'd have to make a new switch at that point. So in the end, nothing's going to happen to your Glock. I mean, just don't put a Glock switch in it. That's all I tell you. You don't have nothing to worry about. It didn't come with one, so you don't have to get rid of it because the government's starting to really tangle with Glock switches. So there you go. Love to hear your insight on that, but generally speaking, keep your Glocks. Don't get rid of your Glocks. That's foolish. Keep your ARs, keep your AR pistols, all that stuff. But any thoughts or insight, put it below. Do want to take a moment, so most will watch this channel. Hey, they're not subscribers. Click that subscribe button. Greatly increases the algorithm and our ability to get these messages out. That link is below. But the most important part of this channel, we take prayer requests. So please don't ever, ever hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, love guns.